everyone. Thank you for the invitation. It's a great honor. It's great to be here. I don't get to present a lot in Greece, so that's a great opportunity. I know you're already tired and it's been a long day, so I'll try to keep it short as much as I can. So basically this is not exactly about Greece, but is a research paper that is co-authored with a colleague of mine at the United Arab Emirates University, Dr. Amani Lansasi, and we're looking at countries that have high rents from natural resources and what happens in these countries in terms of health expenditures and also in terms of health outcomes. So this is the outline of the presentation. So basically, there is a conventional wisdom going around that says that, look, if you are wealthier, oh, I can't do that. I can't do that. It's all right. So basically, there is conventional wisdom that says that if you're wealthier, you're going to be healthier. You have better, you have higher income, you're going to have, I don't need it. Better standards of living. You think I need it? I don't need it. I'm good.
They need it. No, you. They need it.
You can't hear me? Okay. So what I was saying is you have higher income, you're going to have better standards of living, and you're going to have better health, and so therefore wealthier is healthier. Now, of course, if you're in a country that depends a lot on natural resources, then a great portion of your GDP depends on these resources, and therefore you're getting all these revenues, which you can go back and invest in the population to build your human capital in the form of health and in form of education, etc. So you have these revenues, you can go back and put them in your population. And if you are depending specifically on depleting resources, for example, oil, minerals, things like that, that one day in the future they're going to finish, then you need to really think about that day. You really need to build your human capital today. You really need to invest in your economy, in your population, looking into how you're going to, again, achieve in the future sustainable economic growth. So you really need to be looking really long run and further into the future. So this is a concern that you should be having if you are one of these economies. Now, Carl, 2004, goes and finds that a lot of commodity dependence, especially in minerals and oil, you find that in these countries you have high levels of poverty, malnutrition, lower life expectancy. So you would think that this is kind of a surprising thing because, you know, if you're getting these resources, you're getting these rents, right? You should be doing something with them. You should be investing them. So is this really something that is going on? And if it is, then we should be looking into this, and governments should be really worried about this. If you look at health status in resource economies, then you see that the data shows us that they're worse than in similar income countries. So if you want to look and compare the first column in terms of, for example, per capita health expenditures and life expectancy at birth, what you will see is that energy, mineral, and agricultural export economies are found to be doing worse than non-resource economies. So you have non-resource, non-OECD, so basically lower income countries that manage to achieve higher, for example, life expectancy, even though they are spending less on health. So somehow they're able to spend less and achieve better outcomes. So this is a paradox. You should be seeing some of these expenditures in resource economies to be paying off in terms of health outcomes. They should be having some productivity. They should be having some efficiency in terms of what they're doing when you are making those investments. These are three very simple graphs. nothing too sophisticated. This one has to do with hydrocarbons. This one has to do with agricultural exports. And the third one over there has to do with mineral rents. And for the two of them, basically, you see a negative correlation between life expectancy and the rents that these countries are getting. So what is happening? We are getting more rents from these resources, and life expectancy is lower. So this is, remember, keep this in mind, this is simple correlation, okay? So this is where our intuition behind the question is hiding. This is why we want to investigate this issue in this paper, thinking that indeed there could be a negative relationship behind these two variables, basically. So we have two research questions that we're looking at. After controlling for historical, geographical, and institutional qualities for these countries that we are including in our study, we are interested in looking at whether there is still a negative relationship between health expenditures and resource rents, and health outcomes and resource rents. So we're looking at health here in terms of two dimensions. We're looking at how much you're spending, and we're looking at how your population is doing in terms of three different health measures. So if you have poor health, this will lead to lower labor productivity. So the people who are working in your economy, they're going to be producing less, and you're going to be stuck in poverty traps, right? But if in this economy, despite the fact that you have this lower productivity, if in this economy you have natural resource rents and you're putting them back in the economy, then this disrupts this cycle, okay? And it allows for higher consumption in the short run. So you're not really seeing the picture of what's happening. It's like you're diluting the picture because of whatever is happening. Now, another thing that's happening in resource-intense economies is that they have a false sense of security. So that you're thinking, well, look, we have all these resources and we're doing great and the economy is really doing good, but then we're not really looking at what's happening. We're just getting a false sense of security because we have all this oil or because we have all this natural gas, right? And we're not really looking into the picture more. And then, if you do this, you get stuck in the so-called resource curse because you're not getting the economic growth that you really should be getting out of this. Now, another problem that resource-abundant economies could be caught in is the fact that the governments in these countries may mindfully underinvest in human capital. So they might be thinking that we really don't want these people to go to school and to be healthy and to really understand what is happening because, a lot of these countries, they're non-democratic. So then, when the population really develops in that sense in terms of the human capital, you might have other kinds of problems that the government doesn't want to touch. And so therefore, it's better if we just keep these underinvestments because, this is going to work out better for us in terms of governance in the long run. The reindeer effect, however, that Ross brought up says the opposite. It says that, well, look, if you go and spend a bunch of dollars or a bunch of euros in your population, these people are going to be happy. So they're receiving public goods. They have the sense that you're taking good care of them. You're petting them, and they feel that, oh, the government is here. They're really taking care of us. We're getting good care from them, and so we're not going to start thinking about other stories. So we're going to sit here, we're going to join these public goods, and we're not really going to create any problems. So you can have kind of like the same story, but from two different sides. Now, these are the theories behind what could be happening and what is happening, and there isn't really a clear explanation about what is happening, but all of these things probably are happening at the same time. At the same time, some studies are finding that some resource economies invest more in human capital, but according to some studies by Gilfison and others, they invest less as a percent of GDP in education. Okay, so you have already some negative effects in terms of what they're doing, and oil windfall. So when you have a lot of oil in your economy, you're going to have more social spending. This is the one that I was talking about before, that you really want to take care of them, and they feel that you really care about them, so they're not going to start causing problems. And they lead to better quality of life through significant reductions in infant mortality and gains in longevity. This is a recent paper last year by Kote and Chui, and this is the one that is closest to what we're doing. They're actually looking at what's the relationship between health and resources. Okay, so what are we doing here? We're trying to look at health expenditures and health outcomes in resource economies. We're going to look at two things. We're going to look at life expectancy, so we're looking at this as a measure of what extends life, and we're also looking at some chronic health conditions that we believe that really deteriorate the quality of life. These are, for example, diabetes, obesity, etc. We're going to look at three different types of natural resources, so we're going to separate the countries because it's being dependent on agricultural exports is not exactly the same thing, and it doesn't really work the same way in the economy as being dependent on, for example, oil. So we're going to split them into three categories because the nature of the resource is different. And we're going to cover a large sample of countries, so here we're going to have 118 countries from around the globe. So I don't want to get into details. These are basically the data we're going to use and the sources, where they come from, and I'm not going to get into equations and things like this, so I'm not getting into technical stuff. I just want to tell you we run regression, so we're doing statistical analysis of health expenditures and of the health outcomes. So we're running two different models. The first one is the one that we are trying to explain health expenditure. So what we are doing here is we're trying to see whether these rents and whether some other characteristics, for example, the historical, geographical, and the institutional qualities of a specific country matter, excuse me, for health expenditure. So this is the first model. And the second model that we're going to try to estimate is whether, again, the resource rents that you're getting and your institutional, geographical, and historical values matter for the health status of your population, so how they are related. If anyone wants to ask questions about the specifics, I'm happy to answer them. I don't want to tire you with all these details. This is a preview of the main findings that we have. So what you see here is that we separate the countries in three categories: the hydrocarbon economies, the mineral economies, and the agricultural economies. And what do you find? We find that in hydrocarbon countries, the more rents you have, the less the public spending on health expenditures. We also have that we find an improvement in terms of diabetes and obesity, but we don't see any improvements in life expectancy. So these countries are rich in terms of resources. They seem to be doing really well, but how is this very well reflected in the life expectancy of the population? In the end of the day, life expectancy is the number one indicator of how we're looking at life. So when we're talking about life, this is the first thing that we're looking at. So how are these countries enjoying improvement and development if they're not seeing any improvement in the life expectancy in the population? For mineral economies, what do you see there? Very important thing. They have, the more rents they have, they spend more on health expenditures, both as a public expenditures as share of GDP and per capita. What is the effect of this expenditure in terms of results? What do these expenditures do? Nothing. You don't see any improvement in life expectancy, any improvement in obesity, any improvement in diabetes rates. So where does this, what is the efficiency of this spending? What does it do? Why are we spending it if we don't see any improvements in the health of the population? For agricultural economies, we have a kind of better picture because you get an increase in both and an improvement in terms of life expectancy and of diabetes, but you can understand that the nature of the work involved, of the structure of the economy, and the way that agricultural products are produced to start with is completely different than hydrocarbons and minerals. People are in the fields producing tomatoes and strawberries, right? It's a completely different story. So for agricultural economies, we see a kind of different story. Some tables, basically these are the estimates, the statistical estimates that we get, and these statistical estimates I have already summarized in the preview of the results. So again, unless you really want me to go into this and talk about coefficients and statistical significance, and you all drop dead in 5 minutes, I'm not going to do this. I mean, if you really want to, I can try, but no, it's okay. It's too late. And this is one table of the results about life expectancy, and you kind of see the same result over here that I briefly mentioned in the preview of the results. And then we do some robustness checks to see whether our statistical results whether the statistical results hold when you add different geographical, historical, institutional variables. So the main picture here is that when you add here more controls, so when you do the robustness check and you add more controls, you see the numbers in bold, they hold on both columns. This means that if you change small things in the model, your results are good. This means that you can trust the results. This is all this is saying without worrying too much about the numbers. So the conclusion here is that you remember what I started with, these negative relationships I was worried about. I was saying, look, they're getting so much, they have all these rents, but then negative relationship, well, we don't really show this negative relationship. We don't find this negative relationship. All we can claim is that, look, if you are investing, like in mineral economies, you don't see the efficiency of this investment in the population in terms of health outcomes. That's one. And in the energy economies, you don't see any improvements in life expectancy at birth, which says to me, you're really consuming luxury goods, you really seem to be doing all right and having a high per capita income, but how is this reflected in terms of your life? So one thing I want to say here, and I'm done, is that this should be somewhat alarming to the people who are forming policy, who are thinking about how much to spend and where this spending is going, because you don't just want to take the money from here and put it there and say, okay, I did my part of the job. Now, if this works, it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. What does this mean? When you send your kids to school, you don't just want a piece of paper. You want them, when they come back, to know how to read and write, right? You want this to turn into actual education. You don't just say, oh, they went to school from 8 to 1 p.m. and then they stayed busy for these 5 hours, so I did my part and I don't care about the rest. You actually expect some more, right? So this is what the policymakers should be worried about, and not just putting the numbers there and say, okay, I did my job, I can go home now and I'm done. Thank you very much.